What made you join this company, Robinhood?
Around the time when I was thinking of joining companies, I was excited about startups. Uber was hot, Coinbase had a little bit of traction. I had a return offer from Google already. I ran into the Robinhood team at the Stanford career fair. Next day, I got an email from one of the Robinhood co-founders. He sent me an email saying you should come by, meet our team, and interview. And at the end of it, he said, P.S. I'm also Gujarati. I went in, the team was super smart. I think like 10 or so people at the time when I interviewed. I ended up owning a bunch of the engineering pieces. And that team ended up owning growth, risk, and fraud. I would say led to explosive growth and retention and engagement.
And why Spark?
Every founder I had met who had worked with Spark just said amazing things. When you hear again and again for a set of investors, you already have a perception that they are doing craft in the right way. And I wanted to be able to work with companies where I could do fewer investments, have higher conviction, take a board seat, be really, really involved for the life of the company, willingness to make like really long-term bets. Spark was one of the earliest investors in companies like Oculus. Before VR was a thing. One of the early investors in Cruise. Before, again, self-driving cars were an obvious thing.
They invested in Anthropic when no one was believing in what Anthropic was doing. What are a few areas that you think could play out in India?
India is maybe one of the few countries that has like a nationally integrated power grid. That scale of grid interconnectedness doesn't even exist in the United States. It doesn't exist in most countries in the world, which means that, if you really want to scale up the ability to power data centers, where power is a very, very big component of it, you have the ability to kind of go very fast.
Arpan Shah left Kolkata at 17. No plan, no idea what he wanted to do. He ended up as one of the first people inside Robinhood, the app that changed how a generation invests, and went on to become a $100 billion company. In this conversation, we talk about what that was really like, his own startup, and how he became a partner at Spark Capital, the firm that backed Oculus, Cruise, Anthropic, and Twitter, and many others. But the moment that got me was when he talked about India, why he thinks India could own the next decade of AI, not with flashy models, with compute, data, and infrastructure. The boring stuff that turns out to be everything. This is that conversation. Now I bring you Arpan.
All right, Arpan, super excited to have you on the 1947 Rise show.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks a lot for having me, Shiva.
Look, Arpan, you were early employee or founding team member at Robinhood, which I think at some point was almost $100 billion company, or was $100 billion plus company. You founded a startup, sold it. You were a scout at Sequoia. You were a partner at Pear, and now you are a general partner at Spark. Man, what a journey you've had. Very few people are able to do what you have already done at such a young age. Before we get into all of those things, Arpan, I want to step back. I want to go back in time. I want to go back to Park Street in Calcutta. So look, we are really a byproduct of an environment. What shaped you the most while growing up in India?
So for background, I grew up in Calcutta. I didn't grow up on Park Street. That's a very nice street. I grew up on a much smaller street in actually Bhawanipur, which incidentally is the constituency of now the ex chief minister, Mamata Banerjee, and I guess the new chief minister as well. So yeah, like I grew up in Calcutta. Was fortunate to really have a family that was very focused on education from a very young age. And so benefited from a lot of focus there from both like my family, but also all the people around me. And, I think in many ways that opportunity of like seeing, what education could do, having that kind of inculcated from a very early age, and then having good role models around me, kind of built a little bit of self-confidence that, if you kind of push hard and are ambitious and you study and you kind of do the right things at a high level, doors can open for you. So I kind of got an early belief in that growing up, which again was very fortunate to have both in my family and the surroundings I grew up in.
And Arpan, so you did your undergrad in India or US?
I did in the US. So I left India when I was 17 and came for college here.
Got it. And was it always the plan to move to US, or what was the thought process behind it, and where did you land in the US?
It's a funny story. I mean, that was not definitely not the plan growing up. I think I didn't know anyone in my family who had gone abroad to study until my brother went. So the really kind of the doors to know that this was possible to go abroad, like, was as a result of my brother doing it. And for me personally, that was a turning point. But also the other reason, growing up, obviously my parents idealized like the IITs. They're like, oh, if you go to the IITs, that's like the top accomplishment. And so really didn't know that much about American universities, or had not really done that much research. But I was fortunate to be and my brother, for example, was really interested in going abroad for his undergraduate. And so him leading the way was kind of an opening door for me. And the biggest thing for me was I didn't really, before my undergraduate, I was kind of not sure what I wanted to study. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be an engineer. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into medicine. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do economics. I had a lot of these random interests. And I was always surprised by everyone who really knew exactly what they wanted to do. And when I learned that going to the US in particular, you don't have to declare your major. You can kind of go undeclared and then figure out what you want to study. That was extremely appealing to me. So that was, I think, the biggest personal motivation. And then my brother going kind of made it feel like it was more possible. And that was the biggest reason why I felt like, okay, you know what, I should try hard to see if I can also do it. Because if I can, then I can figure out later what I really want to study, which, all my peers were picking kind of, hey, you want to be an engineer, you start preparing for IIT from like 10th grade. You start kind of thinking about it. Some of my friends went to Kota. And so, there were people who were already kind of picking which world they will go towards. And I just found myself not entirely sure what that would look like for me at that time.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And looks like you landed at Stanford.
Yeah. It
How
was,
was the experience like at Stanford?
I mean, first of all, I count myself quite lucky in some ways. Like, no one really knows why they get into any university one way or another. And honestly, I still don't know why I got in. But obviously very grateful. I think the funny story is I kind of learned more about Stanford very close to the application deadline. I'd heard about the Ivy Leagues and the famous East Coast universities, MIT, Harvard, all of those. And Stanford, incidentally, my brother, who was in the US now at the time, was like, oh, actually, if you are thinking about really good schools, you should absolutely be thinking about Stanford. That's when I first started looking into it, pretty close to the deadline. So it's again, a lot of luck went my way in some ways. My brother mentioned that university. I decided to apply and then I got in. All three things were kind of lucky. But Stanford opened my eyes. It was the first time I kind of really took what engineering could do more seriously. For whatever reason, growing up, my perception of what engineering was more IT. Like, I always associated it more with the traditional IT industry. And that always felt interesting, but not that compelling to me. It felt, not that creative, not that interesting. And I always thought it was maybe not that inspiring a path at the time. And when I got to Stanford, it was the first time I kind of got exposed to startups and got exposed to innovative stuff happening as a result of computer science, as a result of electrical engineering, as a result of people who are doing mechanical engineering. It didn't just feel like you go and do things that have already been done. It felt like it could be a path to do new things, things that, were innovative or pushing the boundary of or frontier of engineering. So I credit Stanford a lot to making me excited and interested in thinking about engineering as a path to creative work, not just economically good, fruitful work. And that was the reason why when I got to Stanford, I think after like the first quarter, so they have the quarter system where, they encourage you to explore. And so the first quarter, I explored a lot of things. I took, I think, a biology class. I took like a history class. I took economics class. I took a computer science class. And after that first quarter, I was like, okay, you know what? I can see myself doing engineering. So after that, I kind of moved towards engineering. But it was very formative for me.
Got it. So look, Arpan, you interned at Tesla, Fitbit, and there was another internship.
I interned at Microsoft. I interned at Google a couple of times. Yeah.
Got it. And look, you had already interned at one of the most iconic companies, and after graduation, look, you could have joined any of these top companies, right? And coming from India, risk appetite typically is low, on the lower side. What made you join this company, Robinhood, when maybe few people knew about this company? And what was the conviction? And also, what's the story behind it? What was the first conversation with the founders?
So it's a really good question. I mean, I think that one of my, in hindsight, this is like not something I fully could articulate at the time. So if you asked me at the time, it was not this clear. But I think I've always been someone who has been open to trying interesting new things if the opportunity presents itself. But my kind of interest in the financial markets or markets in general came as a result of actually the internship I did at Tesla. So I was interning at Tesla and working on actually the project, the supercharger, which at the time was called the fast charger, which is, as you know, like Tesla has this network of chargers and across the world actually. And it's maybe probably one of the big reasons why it is still a really good experience. It's a much better experience to buy a Tesla car versus another electric car. The car itself is great, but that charging network makes it feel like a no-brainer, which at the time I didn't appreciate, which tells you, like, again, Elon's farsightedness in many ways and why he's such a special entrepreneur. But so I worked on that project, and incidentally, that internship was interesting in two ways. One, I learned I didn't want to be an electrical engineer, like in a career. I was studying electrical engineering, doing a lot of work on circuits and devices, and my internship was actually designing some of the circuits for this supercharger. And I learned, from that experience that I was like, oh my God, even in the most innovative company like Tesla, you're still reusing a lot of existing knowledge. You're not, you're kind of combining them in unique ways, but you're leveraging, what has been learned about electronics and circuits and current and all of that stuff from like decades ago. So I learned that, okay, I don't want to be a practicing electrical engineer. But the other thing I learned was that the Model S had not come out yet. And I got a chance to see the car in the flesh and, looked inside the car, sat inside it. Someone actually took us for a little test drive as well. And I was blown away. I thought this car would be incredibly successful. So after my internship, I actually tried to buy some Tesla stock. And, at the time, I don't know if it's still there, but right off the Stanford campus, there was an E-Trade office. And I went in there actually. Anyways, that was the first time I learned about how much people charged per trade. So it was the first time I had exposure to this idea that, people are charging, I think it was like $10+ at the time, per trade, per transaction. And, coming from India, $10 every time you trade felt like this massive amount of money. It just felt like ridiculous. So that was in my mind. And then fast forward, many years later, when I heard about Robinhood, I saw actually their promo video. App had not launched yet, but they had this like wait list you could sign up for. And this video that, a friend sent me saying, hey, this looks really interesting. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, I would absolutely use this product. So I just signed up for it. And I, forgot about it. I was like, oh, I'll get off the waitlist when I get off. I was thinking of it primarily as a user. And as you said, right, like around the time when I was thinking of joining companies, I had obviously worked at some startups. I was excited about startups, but I was not thinking at that point in time about, a very, very, very early startup. I was thinking about some startups that had a little bit of traction, not ones that were pre-product for sure. So I was, talking to DoorDash, which already had like some, traction and customers. I think I interviewed at Coinbase, which had already like, demonstrated an ability to like buy Bitcoin with. Uber was the hot startup to join at the time. Like, Uber was like considered one of the really, really up and flying companies. I had a return offer from Google already. So that was in the hand. And my parents were very keen that, I should just go back to Google. And, obviously, to be honest, I mean, things would have been just fine at Google as well. But I ran into the Robinhood team at the Stanford Career Fair, and I actually walked up to them to get off the wait list, not to look for a job. But I did have, I was talking to other companies at the time, and so they did like ask me about my background and my experience, and I shared a little bit. That next day, I got an email from one of the Robinhood co-founders, Beju. He sent me an email saying, "Hey, met you at the career fair. It was great chatting with you. Your background seemed really interesting, blah, blah, blah. You should come by, meet our team and interview. We think, your background." I tried to do this startup around EdTech. And to do that, I had used Python and Django. Again, luck works in these weird ways. I think it's hard to make sense of it at the time looking forward, but in hindsight, you can. I'd worked on this project incidentally with some other students at Stanford to build like a class course management thing, which we want to sell in India actually. So I was thinking like that could be a really interesting, like potential small company, and had worked using Python and Django framework. So Python language and Django web framework. And those incidentally were the frameworks on top of which Robinhood had been built at the time. So they were like, "Oh, you understand this already? You could really, really be valuable." So he sent me that email, and at the end of it, he said, "P.S. I'm also Gujarati." And so he appealed to me from his Gujarati background, which I still think is hilarious. I still have that email. It's the funniest thing in hindsight. But anyways, I went in and, met the team. The team was super smart. It was just, I think, like 10 or so people at the time when I interviewed, I think. And, the rest is, history. Like, I loved the team and, was fortunate to get excited about it. And then decided to join. And that was like my job out of college, first job out of
First off, Arpan, walk us through your journey at Robinhood, man. You joined Robinhood. What were the few things that you worked on, that you own, and you're really proud of those things building at Robinhood?
Yeah, so I joined initially as a backend engineer and started working on some of the brokerage backend. But very quickly after, I don't even know if it had been a few months, but it had been very, very soon after joining. One of the Robinhood co-founders pulled me aside, and then one of the other engineers there, actually he was the first data scientist, pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we don't have a data team. We should start a data org." And that ended up leading to me and this data scientist starting the data org. I ended up owning a bunch of the engineering pieces. He ran the data science piece. And that team ended up owning, growth for a while, risk and fraud, functions around all the stuff we did around news in the application, all the notifications that were launched, all the infrastructure back in the background that ran experimentation, all the stuff that we tracked to figure out how the app was doing, which I think was fundamental to realizing how we can grow effectively, efficiently, but also how can we retain the customers already on the platform. As the platform grew even further, we ended up, powering a lot of the really critical parts of the infrastructure that did the order routing. So when an order gets placed, which market maker it gets routed to based on what is best for the customers, that was built out of this team. So I think a lot of the really, really critical parts of the product infrastructure, a lot of the new ideas that we experimented with and played with, all came out of my teams. And so that, I can't take the full credit. Like, I had a whole team and there were lots of people who contributed, but I feel really proud that, I think that team probably moved the needle a lot on every part of the product that I would say led to explosive growth and retention and engagement, and powered end to end the entire stack and infrastructure, which, even today, I think the infrastructure around data that Robinhood built was the most detailed and in depth. We didn't use Mixpanel, we didn't use any of these off the shelf Amplitude and so on. We leveraged a lot of it in house that I think allowed us to scale data collection to levels that others were afraid of doing at the time because of costs and other reasons. But because we had built it in house, we really understood every part of that journey in a way that very few companies did at the time. And I think that was a superpower that Robinhood had. I'm really, really proud that, my teams helped power and build that.
And Arpan, look, life was good. You were enjoying building at Robinhood, and Robinhood was a ship rocket. So why Flannel? What's the founding story, and what were you really trying to solve for?
Yeah, so the journey there, in many ways, if you spend some time in these fintechs and you like are touching a lot of the pieces, you can't help but realize that the way money moves, or maybe you can help realize, but at least I couldn't help but focus on it. And my co-founder, who was also my roommate at Stanford, who had convinced to join Robinhood, which is a whole other story. One of his teams was the money movement team that actually handled the payment flow. And one of my teams was the risk and fraud functions and areas. And I had spent a lot of time looking at what happens as a result of money not moving efficiently within the United States. And, there's this like old school system called ACH. It is, built on top of checks. And as a result, money doesn't settle instantly. He felt the pain from like a management issue, like how you build the system and engineer it. It felt very archaic. You have to send these files in. The files get processed overnight. If the file is formatted even a little bit off, it fails. There's a lot of issues. There's money you think is in the account is not in the account by the time the money settles. All of those issues he saw. And I saw kind of the exposure that, Robinhood and others had because of this, the risk exposure of all this money in flight. And so, we kind of got really obsessed with thinking, maybe there's a better way to redesign the payment infrastructure and the whole payment landscape in the US that does not rely on this type of flow. And we got really excited about some of the innovation that was happening in the instant settlement infrastructure that was coming up. There was FedNow was being talked about, which would be like UPI. There was already RTP, which was owned by a consortium of banks, but a private instant settlement network. Zelle, which was using old school infrastructure, but had a lot of this like really nice customer experience of money moving instantly. And then you had, Visa and MasterCard build out this pushing over debit cards ecosystem. So people were realizing that this is really important. And we felt like building for that world would be the smart thing to do. And we couldn't stop like thinking about this problem. So at some point, the company like Robinhood was going to go public at some point in the following year. And we felt like it was on a good place. Like Robinhood was going to do well. The trajectory, like the job, quote unquote, we had done our work there, and it's time to maybe try solve this problem. Me and my co-founder got really excited about it, and that's kind of the reason why we decided to start something.
And very quickly, Plaid got excited. They came in and they ended up acquiring you. Arpan, we'll move to your current role,
Yes.
Spark Capital. I read a blog around one of the partners or founders at Spark Capital mentioned that the founders that you were working with, Arpan was working with, founders was really singing praises for you, and more around the empathy, the advice, and the lived experience that you were offering them. Were you paying them, Arpan?
It's a good question. No, I wish I should be paying more people. No, I mean, I think like, my own founder journey, I think you do realize that this is like a very, very, like being a founder is a difficult job, right? It's not easy. You believe something that maybe others don't see. You have to convince investors, customers, potential employees, all to believe what you believe. And I think having been through the founder journey myself, that you can't, I feel like it's very easy for me to understand that there is like all of these things that founders are thinking about all the time. And one of the big ways that I feel like founders like to work with me, and I've enjoyed working with founders, is to have that really deep level of transparency and trust around the every aspect of the journey. And sometimes that means that, I don't get to work with that founder at that point in time, but you build a relationship over time, and then eventually you do get a chance to work with that founder in a much deeper way. And so thinking about things in a slightly longer term horizon, and really, really feeling like you give before you get. You give from everything you've learned and an experience you've had before you try to get something from them. It's something I learned, both being a founder, but also some of the folks I really respected and admired in the industry. And that is what I try to practice. And, it's been really fun. I think like, not every company is, up and to the right. In fact, most companies are not up and to the right. Every company, Robinhood included, had many challenging moments, many stressful days when, people, myself included, thought that, this company could be like in real trouble. And you kind of need to work with the founder through that. And that belief and ability to navigate those stressful, tough times is something that, you, as an investor and partner for the company, should try to bring to the table. And so, I've really fortunate to work with great founders who appreciate that. And then, obviously not every founder journey is very successful. Some journeys end in great outcomes and some don't, but you still kind of have to respect the founder's attempt to make it happen, right? Like, you kind of have to really, I'm in awe when I meet founders. I just have so much admiration for people going down this path, because it is so difficult, but at the same time, so inspiring. And every time I'm with a founder, like articulating their ambition and vision, I can't invest in every founder that I like. In fact, there are times when I think a company is really interesting, but either my own thesis doesn't match it, or we as a fund cannot participate at that point in time. But I still leave the call feeling like, oh my God, I'm so lucky to get a chance to like listen to this story. And even when I don't invest, I often leave the conversation feeling like, wow, like if that founder succeeds, the world will be an amazing place. And that is just so fun. I mean, very, very lucky and privileged, and happy that, founders appreciate it too.
Yeah. Arpan, we'll step back a bit. Look, you were operator, founder. What made you go into investing full time? And why Spark? And what is Spark currently focusing on?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I actually, in many ways, enjoyed operating a lot. Like, I enjoy building, I enjoy running things. In many ways, am a person who likes to be inside the thick of things. And so being a VC or being an investor was not like a natural path where I was like, oh, one day I'll just do this. Um, it kind of, I got to that point mostly by starting first with angel investing. And, I was a scout with Sequoia. And that one thing led to another, to me becoming a visiting partner at Pear, to then becoming a partner at Pear. So like in many ways, I tiptoed into it, not like a early plan in some ways. The thing that took me to Spark in particular was, first of all, every founder I had met who had worked with Spark just said amazing things. Spark actually led the seed round in Plaid. And after I got to Plaid, and even there, I heard just amazing things about Spark. and really respected the Plaid founders. And so, when you hear again and again a very, very high degree of praise and reputation for a set of investors, obviously they'd been part of amazing companies. You already have a perception that, they are doing the craft in the right way. And for me, journeying from Pear to Spark was primarily a question of like stage, where at Pear I was primarily focused on seed and pre-seed, so like very early stage. And I wanted to do more Series A investments as well. The goal really for me was to be able to do fewer investments and try to partner with the company for a much longer period of time. So seed and pre-seed, of course, the volume of investments is much larger because you're in the very, very early, sometimes just inception stage. So the companies there obviously have like a higher death rate, higher failure rate. So you just have more investments overall. And I wanted to be able to work with companies where I could do fewer investments, have higher conviction, take a board seat, be really, really involved for the life of the company, and hopefully, when they go public as well, be there, right, for that entire period of time, see all the ups and downs and journey, and be part of that journey. So that level of involvement is really what I wanted. And Spark, the way they make decisions, the way they think about the future, the willingness to make like really long-term bets. Spark was one of the earliest investors in companies like Oculus before VR was a thing. One of the early investors in Cruise. Before, again, self-driving cars were an obvious thing. Today, I mean, like now you can just go to the Bay Area and actually lots of parts of the US and ride one. Before that was obvious, they were investors in that idea. I just consistently saw, there were early investors in Twitter and Tumblr. So like investing in ideas ahead of their time. And it just felt like there was something here, there's something magical that was allowing them to do that. And then I spent more time with the Spark team, met every single person there, got to know them over many months. And everyone I met was, first of all, people I would love spending time with. They were just really good people. But secondly, they were believers in technology, believers in the future, believers in the potential for technology to really transform things. So it wasn't just people who were investing. Obviously, returns matter. Obviously, you want to invest in companies that are successful. But people fundamentally believed that like technology was the path to that outcome. And the collaborative spirit of having a small team of people who can work together, look at companies together, was the ethos, which again, from my own background previously, even at Pear, that was the ethos that I really appreciated there as well. And so the philosophy and approach was one I believed. The reputation preceded itself. Everyone I met was phenomenal. And I felt like this was the type of place where I could really partner with companies for a very long time and do more Series A investments, which I think is more aligned with the way I like to.
Mhm. Got it. And yeah, I think Spark did it again recently, where they invested in Anthropic when no one was believing in what Anthropic was doing, and I believe Spark is the only investor that sits on the board of Anthropic, and Anthropic is one of the generational companies that we are seeing right in front of us. Arpan, what are you focused on these days? What kind of areas that excites you the most when you're looking at investing?
Yeah, I think we are all pretty general in our purview, and then at times there are interests that we start doubling down or focusing on. Currently, one of the things that I am spending a lot of time thinking about is what are the implications, second, third order effects of the explosion in demand for both tokens as a result of coding exploding, but also explosion of people who can write software, build things. What happens as a result of that, both from an infrastructure perspective? So what needs to change to power all of that? It has implications on power, on data centers, on sandboxes, on CPUs, on how databases get work, like how you interact with databases, how you interact with security paradigms. All of that infrastructure has to evolve. So I'm spending a lot of time on that. But also, what is the implication on people like you and me who are interested in building things to have that ability be much, much easier, much, much faster? What does it mean for the types of tools and products that we would want in the future in a world where writing code gets easier and easier? Like what like does code review look like? What does the ability to like understand what applications are doing look like? What does it mean to have something in production which serves some goal? So like, if you're running a business or if someone wants to run a new business, what does it mean for the type of tools and stack around it that can really scale with you? And then a world where agents become far more prevalent as customers, right? You have new paradigms of buying things, new paradigms of using tools, search, things that you and I oftentimes look for. It's very possible in the future. In fact, I think very likely that we will do a part of it. And then a large part of it will be done by agents on our behalf. And so what does that mean for how some of these tools that you build should look? So that, coming back to that thing of how you build these things, do websites need to be designed with human beings as the customer in mind? Do they need to be as like beautiful and aesthetic in some ways? And maybe they do, maybe they still do because humans will be customers, but maybe there is also a use for things that are more agent friendly, which maybe don't look the same. And so those are some of the questions I'm thinking about and really interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe you do have an investment in a space where it helps agents or it empowers agents, which is parallel. And Arpan, feel free to talk about one or two investments that you have made and you're pretty excited about.
I can speak as a fund as well, and I think because we all look at these companies together. I'll talk about two companies that I think are very interesting and instructive about what is unique about this time, both for entrepreneurs and builders, but also for people like you and me who are just thinking about the space. One company I think is really interesting is a company called excuse me. It's a company called Granola, which so one of the companies is Granola, which is, if you zoom out and think about it, it's the nth AI note taker or like note taking app. And, you would zoom out and think, wait, why does this company exist? Why is it interesting? But it's a good example of why in the world of AI, you have to reimagine and rethink what is the most important part of an application. What Granola did really, really well was it didn't make the AI part front and center, but it made it appear when you needed it and otherwise go out of the way. And that is possible in a way that AI enables in a way that other tools could not enable before. Like the contextual information it can gather is done almost seamlessly because of AI, and that seamlessness enables that new types of user experience and paradigm. And so it exploded not because they did something others could not do, but they redesigned the whole experience thinking about AI top of mind. And I think that is an incredibly important capability for new builders, and anyone who's thinking about creating a company or an app in the AI native sense should be thinking about. And we're really excited about it. It recently crossed over $1 billion in valuation. We invested, very early, and I think it's been a phenomenal success story in the application layer. Another company that I personally work with and I'm involved with at this point in time is a company called RadixArc, which is building the software stack on top of GPUs and powering inference. And if you think about a world where you have tons and tons of GPUs and infrastructure being spun up, data centers coming online, how resources are managed, how inference runs on these platforms, how efficiently it runs, how easy it is for application developers to tune that stack is going to directly impact their bottom line. If all the world looks like is closed models, then you will not really have an ability to control this. The future of open models, I think, should be one that is very exciting. There should be various options people have. And I think having an open stack where you can combine various capabilities, whether it's to do RL, whether it's to do inference, that requires a very composable software stack. And I think they're building that. It's a team that came out of Berkeley and Stanford, and NVIDIA, and they're one of the most popular projects in the space called SGLang, which is used at some of the largest companies and largest clusters in the world. Phenomenally technical team, and I think a platform that everyone in the world can leverage without any barriers, which is the most amazing thing. Like if you have a small data center in India or you have a small data center somewhere else in the world, you can get it up and running on the software stack in your own way, right? And that kind of capability will expand the amount of inference compute that is available, expand the usage of these models, and hopefully allow more and more things, interesting things to be built on top. So I'm really excited about that company as well.
Let's talk about India, Arpan.
Yeah.
You come from there, and I'm assuming you do visit India
Of course.
often, and you've been paying attention to the Indian tech ecosystem. What are few areas, Arpan, that you think, and I'll step back, look, you have a view of what's happening in Valley, and it's phenomenal what's going on, and you're at the edge of it. And when you look at India, you can kind of like at least make a sense of, what could play out in India. So in that context, Arpan, what are few areas that you think India would be very, very exciting, or they even would have unfair advantage, and India should be focusing on those things?
I'm glad you asked the question. So first of all, the funny story is many, many, many years ago, I gave a, pretty random, I think, but in hindsight, interesting talk at IIT Hyderabad. It's probably on YouTube somewhere. It's a TEDx talk. And I talked about how AI is the next industrial revolution. This is 7 or 8 years ago, maybe. And I believe that even more today than I did at the time. And I think that it is not just a matter of economic security, economic importance, people's livelihoods, etc., that AI and doing it well will depend on, but also, for countries like India, national security down the road will depend on doing this well. And so getting really good at AI is incredibly important. And so I just want to start with that. I think there's a couple of areas that I think in particular India has maybe incredible advantages that maybe no other country has the same scale of advantage, maybe other than China. But because China is its own ecosystem that the rest of the world maybe does not trust as much, India can really be positioned very powerfully. The first one I would say is data centers and providing compute. India is maybe one of the few countries that has like a nationally integrated power grid, which is a remarkable opportunity because technically you can generate power in one part of the country and use that power in a very, very different part of the country. That scale of grid interconnectedness doesn't even exist in the United States. It doesn't exist in most countries in the world, which means that, if you really want to scale up the ability to power data centers, where power is a very, very big component of it, you have the ability to kind of go very fast at building out these locations, powering GPUs faster than most other places can. Because in a country like the United States, there's a lot of concerns around what does it mean for a data center to join the grid in a location? Does it mean that power gets more expensive for others? Does it mean that you're likely to have more power outages, because of what that local demand might look like? But India can kind of remove all of those concerns away, and in many ways scale up data center production faster than most other countries can. And the reason why I think it's really exciting and important to do this is I think we're just scratching the surface, in the very, very early innings of how much inference and token demand there will be. I think we're so early that even today, most of the world is not using AI tools. Most of the world is not familiar with how to build and leverage agents. Most of the world even doesn't use ChatGPT today. And so we're like what I would call in the early part of what this will look like. And if you scale that, if you believe, like I believe, that that'll happen, you will need a lot of compute. And that compute, some people are thinking of data centers in space, for example, right? Of course, data centers in space, the idea around that comes from the belief that, it'll be hard to scale here on Earth. But part of that calculus is thinking of the Western world and how hard it is to build things in the Western world and how hard it is to build power, engineering, scaled out infrastructure. But some of those constraints actually don't exist in other parts of the world. And why power something in space when you can build that same scale on Earth? And that is actually possible in a country like India. There's no reason why India could not leverage the demand and desire to scale this type of compute out and the dollars people want to invest to allow them to build those data centers and compute in India, but also entrepreneurs in India should be serving the needs of those data centers coming up. There's the core data center itself that people should be building, and I know Indian startups are doing. You and I have discussed some of those startups that are focused on that, but also the ancillary stuff around that, right? Like it'll need so many things around it, like cooling systems and transformers and power lines, and like all of the stuff that can come around it is just an exciting opportunity for jobs, for manufacturing, for construction, and the investment opportunity is incredible. If you think about the future factories, right, of the world will be in many ways look like a data center. And, if India wants to be a manufacturing powerhouse, which it should be, one part of being a manufacturing powerhouse is being a data center powerhouse, because manufacturing of the future is likely going to have some connection to a data center one way or another. Because better factories, smart factories will be using AI, and that AI will be running out of data centers. So I think it's an incredibly important opportunity that India can literally take the lead in. And I think it's really important. I think the other one that I'm really excited about, again, this one's maybe a little more controversial, is joining the data economy completely and fully. You have, we have kind of seen now over the years that the demand for data, reinforcement learning environments, real world data, and data in unique and different situations continues to be a very fast growing market. There's maybe two big ingredients to really good models, right? It's data and compute. And I think India should do both. So we talked about compute, and the second one to talk about is data, where, robotics and large language models, biology foundation models that are, building world models, like understanding the world and physical spaces, physics. People are building these models in all of these unique areas, but they all need data. What happened with large language models was that we had internet scale data already, right? That data already existed. Even then, for things like coding, for things like, specialized use cases in legal, finance, etc., people are still scaling and needed to scale out data gathering. In all the other areas like biology, physical world models, robotics, that data just doesn't exist. And you need wet labs for biology. You need people doing things in the real world for robotics. You need people being in unique environments and spaces for world models. And people should embrace that and become a provider for that data for models across the world. I think the concern people might have is that, hey, are you doing things that will replace your own job in the future? And look, I've always believed that new waves of technology create new jobs and new opportunities. We shouldn't be, stitching every single cloth by hand. We should use the sewing machine, right? Like, and similarly, I think this will automate some part of jobs. I think new jobs will come. But the second more important part of this that I think is underappreciated is this is going to happen anyways. People will, one way or another, produce this data anyways. And if it's not India, it might be Africa. If it's not Africa, it'll be some other part of the world that will provide this data. The desire and demand to build this technology is so large that the capital will flow regardless, and capital will find its way to willing providers of that data. And it'll either go to a place like India, which has the scale of population, the distributed way of doing that because internet exists, you have smartphones, you have access to 4G, 5G networks across the country. Either it'll go to a country like India or it'll go elsewhere. And I think, hundreds of billions of dollars will be spent on data over the next decade. And that is an opportunity for people in India of the type and scale of the gig economy was. That has already happened. That revolution already came through India, and it's transformed many people's lives. I think that similar opportunity exists here, and I think India should lean into it because it's going to happen anyways.
India should become data center, compute, and data capital of the world. That's the opportunity.
Absolutely. And everything else will happen anyways, right? Like there's if you think of AI as like a multi-layer stack, right? There is, the model layer, there's a chip and what I call like hardware layer. And India should absolutely do those things. But that'll take time, right? It'll take some time to build the fabs, the infrastructure on memory, like to build kind of the core pieces that provide the chips. It'll also take some time to be able to build out those models because you need to run a lot of experiments. To be a frontier model will take time. Even a company like Sarvam is great on some domains, but to be truly like best in all domains will take some time. And so on that journey, you should absolutely do the picks and shovels that are required to build these things, right? Like while you're building those capabilities, you should absolutely sell as much capacity and capability as you can to the folks who want it. And that's an absolutely massive opportunity.
Arpan, before we wrap this up, when the laptop shuts, who is Arpan?
That's a great question. I mean, look, I have a dog, married, and love to spend time with my wife. My parents are in India still, and they will be there. Their friends, family, everyone is there. I try to call my family fairly frequently. Try to go on walks with my dog. I'm a very curious person about history and what repeats itself over time and what are like evolutions and trends. I'm a tinkerer, so I'm always building something in the background. Now it's easier than ever with tools like Claude Code and Codex. So that's what I'm usually doing. And if I'm trying to relax and spend have fun, it's usually with friends or family, playing board games, grabbing dinner, or oftentimes just honestly just hanging out without an agenda. And so that's where you'll usually kind of find me. But I'm not a very I think there's a lot of people, and there's something I'm trying to get better at. I'm not a very public persona, and in some ways more introverted than extroverted as a person. But I really do enjoy ideas a lot. That's, I think, one of my I'm very motivated and passionate about interesting ideas and the power of ideas and how ideas have evolved over history. And if someone is talking about any interesting ideas, you can grab me for hours. You would have my attention nonstop forever. And so that's me. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Love it, Arpan. Thank you so much for doing it. It was fun.
Of course, Shiva. This was great, and I love what you're doing here with this. Yeah, there's so many interesting stories to tell. I've been listening to a lot of your other existing podcasts and just phenomenal people who it's just so inspiring. Like, again, I told you earlier, when I meet someone doing amazing entrepreneurial, risky, ambitious things, it just can't help but be inspired. It's such an amazing time to be alive and get to hear all these amazing ideas. So it's awesome.
Thank you so much.